During the early decades of the 1900s, after a week of hard labor behind a plow and stubborn mule, or scrubbing laundry by hand over a wash tub and scrubbing board, Berrien County residents were ready for a little rest and relaxation. However, prior to 1920, there were no radios or television, and few had an automobile to escape to the beach or the mountains. Most found their diversion in small gatherings in neighbors' homes, dancing to local musicians, or sitting on their porches singing along with vocal renditions on their Victrolas, or even going for a swim in their local swimming hole at Futch's Ferry or Sandy Bluff, or taking a dip in the Alapaha River. But if a family wished to make a more exotic recreational escape from their rural life, they made an excursion 90 miles south to White Springs, Florida, a major tourist resort. White Springs Resort was established in 1903 and had several fine hotels built to accommodate tourists who came to bathe in the medicinal waters of the mineral springs. The spring house was built around the massive spring, featuring a 3-storied balcony for visitors' viewing pleasure. 2 excursion trains a day brought scores of tourists into the town. The town boasted a theater, skating rink, and a boardwalk. Dances were held in the resort hotels. On Sunday, February 28, 1911, a fire broke out from the stove in the Baptist church and moved from building to building. Most of the men of the town were out hunting. The buildings were made mostly of fat pine lumber, and most of the town quickly went up in smoke. Though White Springs did strive to rebuild, South Georgians began looking for a more local excursion site where they could take a cool dip in a refreshing spring, or hold hands with their sweetheart while gliding along on a pair of roller skates. Berrien locals soon found their escape to one of 3 recreation spots in the county: Dixie Lake on the edge of Sparks, Mayhaw Lake near Ray City, or Lucy Lake just north of Alapaha. In 1910, on the westerly side of Berrien County, near the town of Sparks, Reverend Henry S. Dixon was digging a well one day and hit a sulfur spring. The Reverend used the spring for his own family's pleasure and a few of his local neighbors. In 1912, Reverend Dixon passed away, leaving the property and the newfound spring to his wife Anna and his 7 children. In 1914, a group of Sparks businessmen purchased the property and built one of the most popular entertainment centers in South Georgia, called Dixie Lake. A large pool was constructed where the sulfur springs could feed it. Over the pool, a 2-story building was built. A balcony was built encircling the pool on the second floor where the spectators could observe those swimming. Note the name of the resort, Dixie Lake, painted on the front of the building, likely taking its name from the Dixon Spring. Why it was given that name is a bit of a mystery, since it was only a bathing pool and there was not a lake nearby. Located adjacent to the bathing pool was a skating rink, a restaurant, and at one time a movie theater. In the June 4th, 1915 issue of the Tifton Gazette, the virtues of the new resort were highly plauded. Dixie Lake, the popular resort at Sparks, has been open for some time now, and the crowds are getting larger every day. People coming from all the towns throughout this section to bathe in its refreshing waters and enjoy a good time. The lake is within the incorporate limits of the town of Sparks, and this fact alone assures good order. However, the company has a policeman of its own to see that everything goes along as it should. It is not in a swamp, but the lake is ideally situated, and the people going there are so well pleased that they will return and take their friends with them. The article goes on to report, special attention is paid to picnic parties, and the picnickers allowed every privilege of the lake. The popularity of the resort is well attested by the announcement that the Georgia and Florida Railway employees and citizens of Douglas will picnic there June 3rd. Many improvements have been made, and all the buildings are equipped with electric lights. Through an ad elsewhere in this paper, the Dixie Sulphur Springs Company, owners of Dixie Lake, invites you to enjoy its advantages. Dixie Lake Resort operated until shortly after the United States entered the World War in Europe in 1917. With the absence of so many of the area's young men, the resort was forced to close because of lack of support. In this April 23, 1920 issue of the Pearson Tribune, it reports, the Dixie Lake Pleasure Resort near Sparks is to be converted into a guano factory, the machinery for which has already been ordered. Thus, pleasure and frivolity gives way to industry and real community benefit. A stone building replaced the wooden frame structure that covered the bathing pool. However, in the early 1960s, the stone building was finally demolished and the pool filled in. Part of the lumber used in the original building, which surrounded the pool, was moved to the W.E. Patterson farm east of Sparks, where it was used to construct a barn and outbuilding on the property. When Interstate 75 was built, an overpass was created at the extension of West Colquitt Street in Sparks, which encroached on the property of Old Dixie Lake. The bathing pool was located just on the south side of Colquitt Street, also known as the Sparks Cutoff Road, and just east of the freeway, almost exactly where the Sparks Inn and Citgo station sit today. Mayhaw Lake was the place in the south end of the county for more than a decade. It was built in 1914 by Elias Moore Hun Knight, father of Judge W.D. Jackknight. In his inaugural newspaper advertisement, Mr. Knight offered free admission to the Fine bathing pool supplied by Fine Sulphur Water, one of the best skating rinks and boxball alleys in this section. Boxball was a modified version of bowling, using smaller balls and knocking down 5 pins set horizontally across a wooden alley. Mr. Knight must have regarded boxball alleys as a good investment. He may have been able to acquire a used alley, or perhaps he purchased direct from the manufacturer. This 1914 ad touted the potential profits of a boxball alley operation. The ad also promoted cold drinks and hot lunches at all hours during day and night. The resort featured a good ball diamond open to visiting teams for match games. The amusement park was such a popular spot that the Georgia and Florida Railroad gave special rates for picnic parties from all points on their line. A boarding house up the road towards Ray City was opened by the Paul Knight family, specifically to provide lodging for the Mayhaw crowd. People arriving in Ray City by train would often disembark just south of the J.M. Patton home and be shuttled to the lake or the boarding house by horse and buggy or by mule and wagon. Young people were the most frequent patrons, finding great glee in gliding around on the 3-inch thick pine wood skating rink floors, supported by 12 by 12 sills underneath. Outside was a large open-air bathing pool, fed by a deep spring well, and enclosed on 4 sides by a balcony for viewing the swimmers. Picnic tables and concession stands were plentiful. Across from the rink was a baseball diamond near a lime sink lake, where mayhaw trees flourished, thus the resort's name. People from all over the area would journey to Mayhaw Lake, especially on holidays such as the 4th of July or Labor Day. On these occasions, there would be a full day of fun and frolic, highlighted by a baseball game in the afternoon. The local team from Ray City was one of the best semi-pro teams in this part of the country. Among the players were Henry and Bryant Swindle, Roy Carter, Marshall Sermons, and Elmer and Charlie Shaw. It was a popular place for Sunday school picnics, and on Saturday nights from 8 to midnight, there was a black piano player who played for dances on the skating rink floor. However, when the young soldiers returned home after World War I and settled down to family life, the resort lost much of its appeal. Many families owned automobiles, and they found more attractive destinations outside of the county. Sometime before 1926, the roller skating rink was closed and converted into a home owned by Hollis Williams. The bathing pool continued in operation until the early 1930s, when the depressed economy caused Mr. Knight to lose the property. Today, as you turn off Highway 37 onto Park Street and travel down past New Raymond Cemetery, it's hard to imagine this little lane once was a busy thoroughfare bringing vacationers from all over South Georgia. A few hundred yards further down the dirt road on the left, you come to the converted roller skating rink home of the Williams. There's no sign of the swimming pool. The trees still provide a shady setting which easily brings to mind the hordes of picnickers who once covered the grounds. Across the road, a cultivated field has erased the baseball diamond that brought some of South Georgia's best ball players together in community duels. About 75 yards out into the field, the little lime sink depression is still visible, and mayhaw trees still surround the dried up recess once known as Mayhaw Lake. At the extreme northern reach of Berrien County was perhaps the largest and most popular excursion resort in the county, Lucy Lake. The lake was actually a widening of the Alapaha River, about 4 miles above the town of Alapaha. As early as 1906, railroad developer J. Henderson had the idea of building a road from Ocilla to Alapaha, then on to Nashville, and eventually to Valdosta. In a November 30th, 1906 article of the Tifton Gazette, it was reported, Captain J. Henderson of Ocilla and Dr. George Polk of Alapaha came to Nashville in an automobile Monday morning. A mass meeting was called in the courthouse, and Mr. Henderson proceeded to lay his plans before the meeting. He says it is no wildcat scheme, but the road is sure to be built next year. He has signed up a contract with the citizens of Alapaha to complete the road to that place next year, and says he will submit a contract or proposition to the citizens of Nashville in a few days, whereby the road can be completed into Nashville within 12 months. Almost 3 years later, the following news item in the Tifton Gazette, dated August 6, 1909, it was reported, it is announced this week that the Ocilla Southern Railroad Company will begin in 2 weeks the operation of trains between Ocilla and Alapaha on the Atlantic coastline. This is a product of the efforts of Senator J. Henderson, who has already built 2 lines of railroad into Ocilla. This, however, is his best, having a charter from Ocilla to Valdosta, and to which city he is building as rapidly as possible. Note in the 1910 Georgia Railroad map, Lucy Lake is not shown, and the printed timetable does not identify it as a scheduled stop on the route between Ocilla and Alapaha. However, with the completion of the route between Ocilla and Nashville in February 1912, the following item was published in the Nashville Herald. From Fitzgerald to Nashville, the first regular train over the Ocilla Southern Railway came into Nashville Thursday morning in charge of Captain J. Henderson, president of the road. The morning train from Fitzgerald is due here at 8:27, returning at 8:55. The afternoon train arrives at 3:17 and departs at 7:25. The freight train arrives at 11:48 a.m. and departs at 1 p.m. Beginning at Nashville, the towns shown on the first time card are as follows: Fred, Griner, Griff, Auville, Alapaha, Lucy Lake, Barano, Gladys, Mixon, Melvin, Reason, Ocilla, Frank, Barnes, Dormany, and Fitzgerald. On the 1912 railroad map, Lucy Lake is shown in the circle. However, it is placed considerably too far north of the Alapaha River. One of the reasons for the development of the railroad line between Ocilla and Nashville was to provide transportation to a large recreational resort at the widening of the Alapaha River near Alapaha. This development was named Lucy Lake in memory of Mr. Henderson's daughter, Lucy Henderson, who died in 1888 at the age of 4 from scalding water received in the Henderson home while she was watching her mother doing some scrubbing chores. His desire was to provide a pleasant place where whole families, especially children, could enjoy themselves. On June 21, 1912, the Nashville Herald reported, "The Ocilla Southern is making a nice picnic ground at Lucy Lake on the Alapaha River. A flowing well of artesian water is the latest improvement. The resort should be advertised." In 1912, the Ocilla chapter of the United Daughters of the Confederacy sponsored a fiddlers' convention at Lucy Lake to raise funds to erect a monument on Irwin County Courthouse grounds to honor Confederate veterans. The Tifton Gazette reported 600 people heard the thrilling old-time fiddling and the music that reaches the inner man, so he forgets church rituals and finds himself patting his foot. For 5 years or so, every newspaper in Tift and Berrien County was filled with reports of church groups and family gatherings spending an evening or an entire weekend partaking of the amenities offered at Lucy Lake. With every offering from swimming and skating to dances and weddings, or even log rollings, Lucy Lake was by far the favorite destination. The main feature of the resort was the swimming pool, which was fed by a sulfur spring artesian well, about 40 feet from the pool itself. At the head of the well, a small pond was created which contained a school of goldfish. The pool was enclosed by a wood-framed two-story building with the spectator's balcony and an eatery on the upper level. Patrons came from Nashville, Ocilla, and points in between. If your party missed the return trip in the afternoon, they were forced to remain at the resort until the next morning. Small cabins, called a motor court, were available for rent, and a nearby service station and store provided gas and groceries for those who came unprepared. Originally, Highway 129 crossed a single-track bridge over the Alapaha River right at Lucy Lake, which made the resort quite accessible by buggy, auto, or excursion train. However, by the summer of 1917, like the other Berrien County resorts, interest in the excursions had waned. Few groups and parties attending functions at Lucy Lake were ever mentioned in articles in the local newspapers. Excursion trains were mostly empty, and the Ocilla Southern was losing money on the route. In June 1918, the Ocilla Southern went into receivership. With the failure of the excursion trains, Henderson was forced to liquidate the property in late October 1918. Alapaha businessman and farmer Tom Purvis purchased the resort, hoping to turn its fortunes around. The great railroad builder of South Georgia and creator of the first Lucy Lake Resort died in 1925 and was buried alongside his wife at the Ocilla Cemetery. Just 3 weeks after the sale to Purvis, the resort met a disastrous end. On Sunday night of the 10th of November, 1918, 5 of the principal buildings at Lucy Lake were completely destroyed by fire. The bathhouse, dining pavilion, skating rink, pool room, and restaurant were all burned. The loss was about $6,000 with no insurance. The fire was said to have been an incendiary origin, as 3 of the buildings were found to be on fire at the same time. I mentioned the first Lucy Lake Resort. Was there another one? Well, yes, sort of. In the February 15, 1928 Valdosta Times, it reported, Lucy Lake will open during the coming summer. This place, a few years ago, was a very popular summer resort and was owned by the late J.A.J. Henderson. But just prior to his death, all the buildings on the place were burned and it was never rebuilt. The article went on to read, recently the property was purchased by Dr. L.A. Carter of Nashville and is being made ready for the summer. The concrete bathing pool was all that was left of the former buildings, this having bathrooms erected around it, and a skating rink and pavilion for dancing will soon be completed. The new version of Lucy Lake appears to have operated till at least the summer of 1931, as it states in the June 4, 1931 Nashville Herald article, Lucy Lake Park News. A large crowd enjoyed a good dance with exceptionally good music by Cliff Wilkerson and his melody vendors of Fitzgerald, Georgia. It went on to read, many fishing parties have visited the lake during the past week. Among them were parties from Ocilla, Fitzgerald, Pearson, Sumner, Douglas, Macon, and others. It also appears that several families had a summer residence in the park, often inviting friends to plan an excursion for the weekend. Later that month, a display ad in the Nashville Herald advertised a Sunday concert by the Nashville Band. The swimming pool will be open all day Sunday and Sunday night. Dr. Carter passed away in 1932, but it appeared that the resort may have continued in operation for a period of time after that. One of the later owners of the resort was Cleve Watson and his son Frank Watson, who operated portions of it until the summer of 1940. When the Alapaha to Ocilla Highway was paved in 1933, a new bridge was built upstream from the resort, and the old bridge was torn down. The direct crossing of the river at Lucy Lake was lost, and with it, the fortunes of Lucy Lake. The service station and store that once provided staples for patrons for 2 decades became a gristmill, which was rumored to provide a liquid form of ground corn, white lightning. The resort was a mere shell of itself by that time, and though there were some business speculators who tried to tempt investors into revitalizing the resort, it never was realized. Today, A faint rutted road leaves Highway 129 just before it crosses over the north bank of the river and disappears into the wooded undergrowth. And somewhere therein are the remains of Lucy Lake and the last of the excursion resorts of Berrien County.